Welcome to Gaming is in Session, episode 3. If you've been with us since episode 1, you know the name of the game. What we do in this show is we're going to cover the first 20% or so of a game and give it a thorough discussion. And Adam and I are ultimately going to decide if we will finish the game. Now, be warned, it only takes one of us to force the other one to have to go through a game to completion. Last time we played Astrobot, and we deemed it worthy of completing. But will today's game meet the same fate? There's only one way to find out when today we cover the Plucky Squire. But Adam, my man, how you doing today?
Alex, I got my first real six string.
Yeah?
I bought it over at the Five and Dime.
Oh, so you're just singing a Bon Jovi song right now? Is that what this is?
Played it till my fingers bled. Oh, by the way, it was the summer of 69. Here's the thing. I've got a statement and a question, Alex. Number one, so statement is, I forgot if I told you or not. I'm sorry. You may have already heard this. Sorry, Alex. The listeners definitely have not. I accidentally landed on a Pandora 80s music station. Dude, not bad. Not bad at all. It is way better than the absolute filth they throw out of our speakers in today's times in music. Mind you, I am not born in the 80s. This is not nostalgia talking. I've never listened to 80s music. I don't know about 80s music. I didn't live in the 80s. Unequivocally, it's better. Is that a hot take, Alex, or is that like a well-known fact and I just am living under a rock?
I think it's a hipster take because I think what's happening is you're right now listening to music and you're listening to everything that's coming out. Whereas when you listen to like a greatest hits of the 80s, you're only listening to the bangers, the songs that have like that stand the test of time. You didn't listen to all the other filth that came out of the 80s. Like shoot, I can't even think of it because it doesn't even matter that much. But I think that's what happened. There is some great stuff that came out in the 80s. There's also a lot of just straight up garbage that came out in the 80s as well. However, also a lot more music is accessible these days than there was. Like back in the 80s, you were basically reliant on either hearing something from a friend who has the tape or whatever gets paid to play on the radio. Now you got YouTube. Every artist can be found on YouTube or Spotify, something like that. You would have never heard Area B on the radio, but that doesn't mean it's not the best song to come out in the past 5 years.
You know it. Here's my question, Alex. It was the summer of 69. Do you think they intentionally, knowingly chose that number for a double entendre and a double meaning? Or do you think the dude literally got a six-string guitar in the summer of 1969?
I don't think it's a double entendre. I think that was the summer when he like 69'd like every night. I think that's what he's. I think that it was a summer of where he either first 69. That summer could have been in the year 1971, could have been in the year 1965, it could have been last year, but it was the summer. You know how there's like the summer of fun you have with your friends, or the summer of Disneyland where you go to Disneyland a bunch. This is the summer of 69. 69 all day, every day.
Interesting.
That's what I think it
is. I've got another question for you, Alex, but first I do want to cover our gamer juice. I'll go first. I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm ready to talk about the effing Plucky Squire, ho. So I'm sticking with water and electrolytes. I need that potassium. I'm going to be going hard, but I'm not that simple B on the other side of the street just sipping my little Starbucks cocktails because I've got my electrolytes, but I found out I like snow cones. I've got some snow cone mix on Tiger's Blood. I'm just going to mix that right in here with my electrolytes. And I don't know if it mixes well with water. It mixes real nice with ice. But I'm about ready to find out right here.
Have you done this before?
No. Not bad. It's kiwi watermelon, essentially, is what I'm tasting here. Not bad.
Is that what? So somebody asked me recently what Tiger's Blood is. I just knew it as a snow cone flavor that was always pretty good. I saw it recently at a gas station on like the Ices, and the fruit they showed was coconut and strawberry.
But, yep, it's watermelon, coconut, and strawberry.
Okay. Why is that called tiger's blood? I don't know. You think tiger's blood tastes like that? Definitely not. Adam, you do need electrolytes if you're going to be 69 and all day. My drink today is Soylent. This Soylent released special seasonal drinks, and they were on sale, so I got them. This is effectively a meal in a bottle, but this is gingerbread flavored. And I don't normally like Soylent I do like Soylent by itself, but usually it's pretty heavy to drink by itself. Let me tell you, the best thing you could do, mix this with coffee. It's like the best coffee drink you'll ever have if you're willing to make that a meal too. But it's Soylent, although 330 calories in a drink, man. But also 16 grams of protein, 2 grams of fiber. I'm going to be buff.
Yeah, you're going to be crapping out your butt is what you're going to be doing.
And it's going to smell like gingerbread.
Okay, Alex, here is my question. We need to jump into the Plucky Squire. But before we even do that, a question. This game is about 10 hours long. We played 2 hours each. I am not going to lie. The entire 2 hours, I was just so consumed with the question, what does the word plucky mean? I did not know. So it's that time. It's the time of the podcast. It's the Plucky roll call, baby. Alex, right now, tell me, what does the word plucky mean?
I'm going to embarrass myself. I only have ever heard it in a context where it makes sense, but I've never.
For what it's worth, I didn't know either, so don't feel bad.
I think it means like brave and brash, not brash, like kind of brave, but also like kind of like a risky version of brave. Like you're going to do dangerous things, but not so dangerous. Yeah, like a risky type, like a childishly risky yet brave. That's what I think plucky means.
According to online dictionaries, it means an awkward, often confused, shifty-eyed individual with a heart of gold. Okay, what's the next plucky? Bum plucky. What does bum plucky mean?
Shifty-eyed anus? I don't know. Bum plucky.
No, it means having someone put cereal in your butt and picking it out. Okay, what is plucky jade?
Is this going to be worse than that last one? I have no idea. Is it a plucky jade like a type of flower or something like that?
It is not. It is a colonial word for a girl whore or wench. How about plucky charms?
That sounds like a sexual thing. Like it sounds like Lucky Charms, and they're like, oh, I gave that girl the plucky charms or something like that. Is it like a nickname for testicles?
It is not. It is a ukulele player in New York City burlesque communities. They may or may not be dressed in a Kermit the Frog meets showgirl getup. Or it's a lesbian blogger. Last one. What is a plucky poo?
Like a poop that like you're constipated and you got to like pluck it out or something? I don't know.
I think you're 0 for 5, buddy. That might be a bean, but regardless, a plucky poo is a gripping or lifting utensil used to move or rotate and turn a steak, fish, or other protein with delicate precision on a grilling surface. You pervert. You should be ashamed of yourself. Alex, let's actually get into the Plucky Squire now that we know what the word plucky means.
Yeah, well, I don't think anything about picking things out of anuses or Kermit the Frog playing a ukulele and drag. The game, yeah, Plucky Squire. So it just came out on PS Plus. If you have that, go for it. Otherwise, it is also out on Nintendo Switch for $35, and it's on Steam for $30. The developers is All Possible Futures. I looked into them. I don't think they've made any other games, and as far as I can tell, there's just 2 people making this game, which is quite impressive. But I imagine it might just be if we roll credits on this game, we'll probably see a lot more people involved. But I just see 2 people on their website, and maybe that's all they got, and that's impressive. The publisher is Devolver Digital. I really like Devolver Digital. They make, you put some things here like Gorn, which is kind of a miss. Hotline Miami, I freaking loved. Inscription, heard amazing things about. Yeah. They make all sorts of weird games. They have the best E3 shows that are just like very irreverent and like rude and funny. So I guess this is a bit off kilter for them, even though it's a novel game. But yeah, that's the rub on Plucky Squire. Adam, you want to describe what this kind of is?
Yeah, so it's very much I guess you can call it like maybe a platforming action game. It's it doesn't really have I guess that it is somewhat of a platformer, but it's much more of an action game. Think almost like Super Nintendo Zelda vibes, kind of. And so you are a squire who team up with your cute little allies, some friends. It's a small little, the squire's looks like a small little boy. He's got other friends like Violet, just a little childhood friend, and then a couple others, very cutesy. They team up to defeat the enemy Humgrump, who is a wizard wanting to instill evil over the world in which this game is based to keep it really high level. And thankfully, this game, from what I can gather, is not super plot heavy. There obviously is the plot that drives the gameplay and the story forward, but it's nothing like a, super in-depth, wow, like the plot's gonna like wreck your soul. That, of course, I've only played 20%, but I get the feeling it's not like that. But that lays down kind of what the world is, what you're doing. You're defeating enemies. You're going after Humgrump. Pretty basic, right, Alex? So far, would you agree?
Yeah, I think the one thing that, like anybody who's seen a trailer, the big conceit is that it's a storybook, right? At the beginning of the game, you walk into a kid's room, you go to his desk, and then like a storybook's on the table. It opens up. Guess what? The game is you're playing through the pages of a storybook, like a kid's storybook called the Plucky Squire. But yeah, in terms of gameplay mechanics, you're right. It's a platform action game, very much like a 2D Zelda game. Got some like puzzling elements to it. We'll get into further what the gameplay mechanics are like. But Adam, before you even started playing the game, well, one thing, I'll back up with the plot. Yeah, plot in terms of like plot heaviness or density or significance, would you say it's about as much as like Astrobot, right? Like as important as the game is, the plot is to the story, about Astrobot level of like serious, right? We're not
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
we're not gonna be telling everybody this is the best story in the game. At least we don't expect it so far. Adam, did you have any? I told you we are gonna play this before it came out. Did you watch any trailers for it? Did you have any first impressions leading into the game before you started playing it?
Yeah, so I hadn't even heard about it until you mentioned it, and I did watch the trailer. My thought was that I really liked the art style. I felt like it was very stylish. It was very different than anything I've ever seen before, which I really like. For those people who listen to our virtual reality podcast, I constantly harp on being unique, being different, and stepping outside the lines of just being original, man, right? So I really like that aspect. And immediately you could grab that from a 2-minute trailer. The transition from a 2D, again, going like a Zelda, Link to the Past type game, to then a 3D platforming type game ish that totally different. Now, there are some added elements I did not see in the trailer that are super awesome. We're going to talk about. That's what I kind of expected was it also looks like a children's game. So I was like, I didn't love that. I was like, I'm going to be playing a kid's game, but it has a really cool art style. That was my overall thoughts before I played it.
Yeah, really similar. Like, I mean, you watch it, first thing you take away is the art style, right? It looks just like a storybook. It's like a very high res version of Zelda Link to the Past, right? That 2D art style, the gameplay. I mean, the art design is really cool. The Plucky Squire, your sword is actually like the edge of like a fountain pen, ink pen, and that just cool mechanics. But the thing that really got me excited about the game was that 2D meets 3D mechanic that you see initially. Like from the trailer, from the get-go, you see this 2D character at one point pop out and become a 3D character. And it's like, oh, okay. So you're playing in the storybook, but then you're popping out and you're in like this 3D environment too. So that whole like storybook art style and then the conceit with the 3D mechanics got me super interested in it. And like it looked like it's going to play with the storybook mechanic in a much better way than a game like Moss, right? The whole conceit of
Yeah.
Moss is that you're playing a storybook, but the book element never really comes into frame except you hear a page turn every once in a while when you change levels. And then, yeah, ultimately, it looked like a novel take on a Zelda clone, but with a bit more stylistic flair, which we know, like for a game like Wind Waker, the style of Wind Waker made Zelda feel very fresh, made the 3D Zelda feel very fresh. And so I was excited about that too. Like, oh, this would be a very fresh take on Zelda, which I would be happy to see because Zelda's getting a bit mundane for me. Anything else you want to add on that, Adam? Or we want to move
No,
on to the
I
next?
think I definitely agree with the storybook. I thought that was really original. The fact that you're normally you play a game and you're just looking and you're like part of the world. But now you're playing a game where the world is in the book. So it's like you're reading the book and all the actions going on in the book. I thought that was really creative. When they turn to actually progress the story, you can turn the page, and then some of the plot, like not necessarily just all of the gameplay, but even when you move screens. So I'm in the forest and I move to the next screen. Well, I move to the right. Well, you got to flip the page, and then the level continues and you're still in the forest. Just the way that was done, I thought was wildly creative. Absolutely loved it. Not saying maybe that's the first time it's ever been done. I don't know. It's the first time I've ever experienced something like that. And they get a lot of points for me right off the bat with the originality and the creativity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, got me really excited watching the trailer, looking into it. So yeah, well, you and I have both. I think, did you stop at 2 hours? I played like 130 minutes is what the clock time says for me.
Yeah,
I just started level 5, I think.
I did 2 hours and 15 minutes. I also got to chapter 5. So I saw the intro screen for chapter 5 and stopped. It was a good time to end, and I feel like that was we'll talk about it here in the future. I feel like that was fitting. I feel like I know enough to make a decision on if I want to continue to play or not. Some first impressions that I had, it very much is like a wave and cyclical to me. In some parts, I was like, wowzers, this is incredible. And then I went through like a trough to where I was like, this isn't like uber great. And then I went to a high point, and then it kind of, that is how my experience went, Alex. So as we already mentioned, I love the fact that it's ingenious, the cleverness. I love the ideas of flipping the pages, another element that we'll just hop into. So if you're listening, you haven't played the game, you're a squire, you're going to enemies, you have your sword. You also, I guess you collect the light bulbs instead of
currency, yeah.
Yeah, it is the currency. And that way you can also unlock different moves. You have a spin move. You can throw your sword now and it'll come back to you almost like a little boomerang. So there's a little, I don't know what you want, combat variety there. It's very minuscule, but the combat is pretty simple. However, one thing they do well is for big events, they keep you on your toes. Right in the beginning, Alex, they had you fight a honey badger, and just randomly, your squire has his sleeves ripped off and he's jacked, and you're playing like a boxing game.
Yeah, it's just a punch. You're playing Punch Out for that boss fight. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a huge surprise to me because I didn't know this was going to be that type of game where it's like, oh, we're jumping into different genres of like old, Nintendo games. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And that was a big surprise for me. I thought the game was going to rely heavily on this whole like pop out, pop in, 3D, 2D stuff. But right out of the gate, before basically you fight like two enemies with the Zelda stuff, then you're playing Punch Out. It was even great because when you see the honey badger, he's got the honey all over his hands, and it looks like boxing gloves. And I was like, man, I just want to punch that guy. I don't even want to hit him with a sword. I don't want to punch him. And then suddenly it was Punch Out. And I was like, yes, I'm playing Punch Out. This is great. So yeah, huge surprise.
Yeah, and that leaves you off on like with the art style. And yeah, it still looks like a kid's game, whatever. A lot of the characters, like one of the main characters was this dude, this wizard with a beard, and he's got the sunglasses on, and like they're trying to add some humor to it as well. In my opinion, the humor doesn't really land. Like it's just not funny. It's like one of those, you can tell they're trying to be funny, but it's really not funny. But
it's like a wholesome, like a kid's cartoon type funny, but with no irony, or sardonicness or even really like wit to it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but just trying to lay the groundwork as a listener, if you haven't even seen it, to want to either see the trailer or know what you're getting into. So then they throw you into the honey badger thing, which I thought was really creative. Skipping ahead a little bit, the second main boss I really liked, or at least I don't know if I'm officially it's a boss, maybe it's not. But at one point, you go into a trading card for Magic the Gathering, and you are fighting the character on the trading card. And it's an RPG battle, almost like Pokemon or something. Or I mean, really, I guess maybe any turn-based RPG, arguably. But that was super, again, really creative and fun. And that person was a archer. So once you don't necessarily defeat them, but you gain their trust, you gain their weapon, which is a bow, and then you use that to fight at least from what I remember, the second main boss, which are a bunch of insects, and you're using the bow, and then it kind of turns into
Almost like a light
almost
gun
like a
game,
point and click game, right? Kind
yeah,
of.
something like that. You're moving a cursor around on a screen to shoot arrows. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but again, it changes it up. It was unexpected, and they did it in a very creative manner, which to me lands really well. So, of the bosses we fought, what did you think about that? Did you enjoy those, or would you rather it be more of like Zelda, where it's still that 2D overworld type look, and you're just going head on head with a boss and nothing like cutesy and different?
Yeah, I liked the punch out fight. I didn't like the RPG. I didn't like the card thing, like that turn-based RPG, because it was almost on rails, right? Like it was pretty obvious what to do to successfully come out of the end of that fight. Like you had no real choices to make, and the game kind of just ran itself. And, and so that kind of bothered me. It's like they could have done something interesting here, but instead it was just kind of like clicking through a bunch of text, and
But I
it's like a
mean, like,
story
but
being
what did
told
you
for
do?
you.
Like in the beginning, I didn't know. So as a listener, when you go into the card, the person in the card, the character, the archer, thinks that you're the enemy. Like you went into this card and they're
Yeah.
like, yo, dog. So you're in a fight. You have the option to talk to them, you have an option to guard, and you have an option to attack. I didn't know necessarily what to do, Alex. So I attacked, which did like nothing. So then I guarded, and then I tried to talk to them, and they were like, I'm
I don't
not
want to
listening
talk.
to you.
Yeah.
So you said it was like easy and you knew what to do. I went between talking and guarding. Um, and I thought I was gonna maybe die because I didn't know what to do. But what did you do that you thought was so obvious? I guess.
I attacked. There's like two attacks. You attack, you could do like a slash or a stab. You attack and it does like some damage, but not much. You can do the stab. It usually misses. If it hits, it does even less damage. You can, but every time you do a move, you get attacked too, and she's doing way more damage than you're doing. You try to talk, and they say, "Oh, I don't want to talk." You try to guard, it just makes it to where you kind of get hurt less. And then at that point, it was obvious like there's literally no way I can win this fight, right? Like to me, at that point, if there was a way to say like, "Oh, escape," like in most RPGs, if you're losing a battle, there's an option to escape. I would have done that. But because that wasn't an option, it's like, well, the only thing I can keep doing is attacking. I bet there's going to be some plot reason, like I'm supposed to die in this fight. And it was apparent after like the first three moves, they're like, oh,
Mm.
you have to die in this fight or come close to dying. And at that point, it was just on rails. And I'm just clicking through, like, all right, at some point, it's going to be at the end of this. And so it really took any kind of strategy or really gameplay out of the turn-based mechanic out of my hands. And that kind of frustrated me. It's like, oh, like it's cool that it's paying homage to a turn-based RPG combat system, but really there's not much going on here, right?
Mm. Okay. I feel like you do have a high bar. Like I definitely see what you're saying there. I didn't mind it. I didn't think that was disappointing. I still thought it was really creative how they set it up. So, but
I mean, I will say, like, it was a creative setup. I think it just went on too long, right? Like, if I get four moves in and I know exactly what I have to do now, and it just takes me hitting the button like six more times before it progresses, and then the way it progresses, I'll get into that later. it's just like I know what's going to happen at the end of this. I'm just going to keep hitting A until the whole thing's done. Like that's not fun for me. Like what? Okay, just show me a cutscene at that point.
Ah, okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. So yeah, I like the boss fights there. One thing you kind of talk a little bit about, you started to go into the puzzle element because that's part of the game that I think is really clever and I really enjoyed too.
Yeah, so I mean, the game, there are like a bunch of different things being balanced, right? There is a component of the game that is 2D action Zelda. Now that's really fun, right? The enemies are fun to attack. It's got nice like art style when you hit them. You got a good responsive thwack whenever you hit them with a sword. You got the new sword moves, which like you don't need them, but they're fun to use. Like throwing the sword is fun. I do that all the time for everything. You get the power ups like the spin attack. It's just 2D Zelda on albeit admittedly kind of small levels because they are confined to like the page.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then you get into these because it is a storybook. And Humdrum has done this thing where it changes the storybook. He's used his magical power to make it to where the stories are not fixed anymore. They can be changed. And so every once in a while, you'll get to a page where there's text, and that text can be adjusted or words that you can pluck out of the sentence, and then you can find another word and pluck it into the sentence, and it changes the format of the level. First example is there's a forest, and it says like the area is in a complete forest. You hit the forest word, pluck it out, and then replace it with the word ruin. And it says like the area is incomplete ruin. And the forest turns into these ruins. And now you can navigate through the level and solve the puzzle. I thought that was really clever. That was initially got me really excited because there's a game called Baba Is You, which is basically nothing but that mechanic. And it's an extremely difficult puzzle game that's really mind-bending and super fun. And I thought, hey, that's a decent homage to it. I can't wait to see what they do with it. And that pops up in a couple places, which is really fun and enjoyable. Maybe the more important puzzle mechanic is that you do end up finding these little warp areas that do warp you out of the book and into this 3D space where you're running around on the desk that the book is initially laid on. You're, jumping on blocks the kids laid around the table, jumping over pencils and stuff like that. And then sometimes you get these power to turn the pages of the book. So, oh, here's a sentence here. I can take the word out, but there's nothing to replace it with. Let me pop out, turn the page of the book, go to another page and grab a word from another page and then go back and place it there and really change the dynamic of that level, which is a really cool conceit for like a game like this and the puzzle nature of it. So I do think the shifting mechanics keep things fresh. Nothing is quite as enjoyable as just the basic Zelda gameplay, in my opinion. But maybe if they just did that, it'd be kind of a boring game. It'd be just like everything else. And one thing I do like is early on in one of the early pages, it just turns into a side scroller. And one of my favorite games like this of all time is Golvelius from Sega Master System. It shifts constantly between side scroller and overworld type Zelda gameplay. And I loved that. And it got me super excited for those side scrolling levels, but they're kind of just, few and far between and nothing really special going on there. But I do just like how it kind of shakes things up. Are you enjoying the puzzles? Was there one that I missed or was there one that you particularly like?
Yeah, I think for the listeners to lay it out, because I do think it's a very important part of the game and its charm in the game. For example, you'll be on a page, you have to go through a passage, but there's a really big insect in the way. So again, you're playing the game and you're looking at a book and your character is in a book, and that is where your frame of reference is. So in the book, there are actual words that are written like in a book, and it says a huge insect is blocking the way. And obviously there's a huge insect blocking the way, but also there's another part of the book slightly to the left where there's like a really small frog and he's looking at the insect and there are the words written and the tiny frog is watching the insect or something like that. And so it's your goal. You have to deduct, which is pretty obvious to realize what words you can hit and move, that you need to take in the first sentence the word huge insect and replace the word huge with the word tiny from tiny frog. But you can't just walk directly to that sentence that says the tiny frog is watching the insect. You have to do more puzzles to figure out how to get to that sentence, to then grab the word tiny to put it in the first sentence to make that insect then tiny, and then it makes the frog really big. But by that point, you can just walk by the tiny insect. So it's a really important part of the game, but I think it's charming. Again, you ancient dinosaur of a man have played all these really freaking random games. I guess I've used this idea and concept before. I've never seen that or heard about it in my life. So as a first time experiencing it, I'm like, man, that's so cool and ingenious, and it's really creative. And I liked it. I was impressed by it. So it's pretty cool. I do like that. And like you also mentioned, the ability part of the plot is Humgrump tried to kick you out of the book because the squire wins in every book that this child has, right? Because he's a good guy. So Humgrump is like, I'm going to kick you out of the freaking book. Then I'm going to win because you're not in the book anymore. So he kicks you out, and that's how you become in the 3D real world. And then again, watch the 2-minute trailer. You'll get an idea of what that transition looks like. I thought it was really creative. I feel like the 3D world is maybe less impressive than the book world, like the 2D world. What do you think about that, Alex?
First, let me comment on the word puzzle thing, because you're not wrong. I think one of the things I do like about this game is it even though I've seen a lot of these elements before in other games, I do like how it puts them all into this game. And whether it's paying homage or just paying lip service to these types of different gameplay mechanics I've seen elsewhere, it does a good job of them for the most part. My issue with the literal wordplay is that it's not as flexible as I'd like it to be. So, for example, with the bug, there's another word somewhere on the page, the word drained, that you can pick out because you're trying to like drain a river or something like that. You can replace huge bug with drained bug, and the bug is still huge, but he's like squashed and flattened. You still can't get past him, but it just affects the bug that way.
That's funny. I didn't. Yeah. I think that's funny. I like
that, and that's great. What disappoints me is that only works like 10% of the time, because you'll find some other word and place it there, and it'll just be like, no, it'll just kick the word out of the sentence. It won't do anything with it.
I did see that, yeah.
Which bothers me, because it's like, I could, like, if they were being really creative with it, they could have, not blocked the solution of the puzzle, but still had some kind of response, like the bug being deflated because it was drained, right?
And they could have made it more difficult.
Yeah.
Too, where you don't know what word to put there. It's obvious, replace tiny with huge. But yeah, and for all we know, maybe later in the game it does get more difficult. I don't know.
Well, I mean, there was even a part where I was juggling like 3 or 4 words, and I was even thinking like, oh man, what word's going to go in here? I can't quite figure out the pattern. Turns out like I just had to go through the level normally and find the word somewhere else and then bring it back. And I was like, well, I could have had this like fun, like critical puzzle solving thing, when really it was like, no, just ignore this and come back later to it, which it wasn't really fun for the wordplay. But getting back to your point about the 2D and the 3D, the 3D gameplay is almost exactly the same thing as the 2D gameplay. There is like a stealth element to it, which I thought was kind of a little bit frustrating, but interesting to just have it in there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
The 3D combat feels way better than the 2D combat. I almost think that as pretty as the 2D art is, as pretty as the visuals are and the storybook art is, the 3D art is really impressive. Like the environment and the graphics and just the way everything feels in the 3D environment. I want to spend so much more time in the 3D world than I want to in the 2D world, because that looks even better. I don't know if it's like the lighting or the textures. It's just a very, very realistic.
Looks ray traced. Yeah. Like the detail is wild, and it kind of like is the ray tracing, the way the shadows and the light. It's very startling to go, but really cool to go from something 2D that looks like a cartoon essentially, to this super detailed 3D world that we're used to the graphics of these AAA games, and that's what it looks like. It's pretty neat, but yeah, I feel like it was pretty linear, and I don't know.
They don't do anything with it, right? They don't do too much with it. Like, for example, it would have been great if when I'm in the 2D storybook and I pop out and I'm 3D running around on the 2D pages, it'd be great if like somehow me running around on the 2D pages really affected what was happening in the story, right? Maybe there would be a bug and I need to pop out in 3D and like jump on him and it like messes up the page in some way or like tears up the page. And then I jump back in and now the page, like I can get through that puzzle or something. I don't know. They don't seem to be doing any kind of like 2D and 3D playing there.
Do you think there's any way that's in the future, or do you think they would have already tipped their hand, you know, 2 hours into the game?
It might be in the future. I don't know. What I thought this game was gonna be, and it doesn't seem to be, at least not yet, is I thought it was gonna be like 4 or 5 books laid out, and then I would be like jumping from book to book. Like I'm running through the first storybook. I pop out because I got something in the first storybook that I want to run to the second storybook and jump in and do something in there, and then come out and then pop back, almost like moving to different dungeons in Zelda, right? Like make this a Zelda clone, but make each book a dungeon, and then have an overworld be the desk. Like that would make so much more sense to me. And also, you could do all the same fun stuff, but it would be it'd really play that like 3D environment meets 2D stuff a lot better. But I don't, maybe it happens later. I don't know. But that would be some cool stuff that they don't seem to be capitalizing. They seem to be introducing a lot of cool mechanics, but not really capitalizing on any of them in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I don't know, it's tough. I definitely see your point in that the way their utilization of the themes and the creative aspects of the game are fairly shallow, admittedly. But I still like that they introduced them, and I still think it's a novel idea. I do like them.
Yeah.
But you're right. The puzzles could be a lot more difficult. And again, I mean, we're only 2 hours in. However, we are on chapter 5, and there's only 10 chapters. So not saying we're halfway through the game. The later chapters may be longer, but I feel like we've probably seen a lot of what they're going to showcase. I can't imagine there being a lot left that they're holding back. Or do you feel I could be wrong in that assumption?
I mean, I think they're probably going to do like more homages to 2D games, like more punch out type thing. Not more punch out levels, but more things that are like,
well, I'm going to cut Alex off there because he is. And I'm going to blame Alex. Say it's his internet. We needed to take a break, and as Alex is in the background here struggling big time. So we will be back in the second segment. We really got to wrap up Plucky Squire and see, do we want to continue playing this game? Do we not? Stay with us, and we'll be back after the break. It's segment 2, the Plucky Squire. Alex, we're starting to get down the brass tacks. We need to have some closing remarks, talk maybe about some annoyances. We've got to decide, dude, are we going to keep playing this game?
Yeah, I guess do you want to give your opinion first? If one of us says yes, then we both have to do it. So I don't know.
I mean, I'm not saying we're immediately going to hop into. We still got a couple things I kind of wanted to mention is, and I'm first we'll hop into how important is the art style to the overall enjoyment of the game, and can the art, I think we both agree, we believe the art style, the ability to go from 2D to 3D, and we really enjoy that. But some aspects of the gameplay, the rather superficial nature of the puzzles that are provided, they're a little lackluster. So can this artistic style carry the game into, admittedly, it's not a huge game, 10 hours, but we've only played 2 hours. Is it worth spending another 8 hours on it? So in your opinion, how are you kind of feeling about that in terms of there's obviously a trade-off. Is it how are you feeling there? Like,
Yeah, I mean that is the novelty of the game, right? Is the art style. Despite I thought the 2D 3D thing was going to be the big mechanic, but it turns out the real treasure of the game, the real thing you're going for, is how charmed you are by the storybook aesthetic, right? Like all the characters. Do you want to see them? Like I think you even mentioned at one point, like you do find these little like what's the word, like concept art pieces. They're like hidden throughout the
yeah,
levels, right? And those are exciting because you see concept art of things that you haven't encountered yet, like characters you haven't seen yet, and they are interesting. Levels you haven't seen yet, those are interesting. Um, but I invoked Wind Waker, and I'll invoke it again here. Is Wind Waker was a Zelda game, but that cell shading of it made it like a timeless Zelda game that you can visit again 10 years down the road, and it looks just as thrilling and exciting. And it seemed like that artistic style made the game more fun than it would have been if it were just the same game but with like 3D packaging to it like normal. Um, and so I'm stuck wondering, like, would this game be as fun without the 2D art style? Or without the storybook art style. I don't know. But what makes me think the art style can't carry the entire game is just the fact that as charming and interesting and clean and nice the storybook parts look, the best looking parts of the game and the parts I find myself wanting to get to faster is the 3D parts of the game. Like I want to run around in the 3D environment more than anything, and at that point, it is just like another 3D action platformer. So I don't know if just the art alone in the game is enough to carry me forward. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, I'm about in the same boat. I don't need to reiterate everything you said. I pretty much feel the same. It's creative. I do think some of the other gameplay elements I'm a little higher on than you are, just because I've never seen them before. So I find them more novel than a lot of the games you've already referenced that maybe they're making an homage to, maybe they're building off of. Maybe they didn't know they existed, right? Like, who knows if they played some of those freaking random games that you have. But and like in the beginning, I really liked how when you move to a different page or you move further into the forest or wherever, that it turned the page. Or when you're in the point where essentially it's going through the plot, like it's a cutscene essentially, but they still flip the page and then the art shows up. And in the first like maybe 5 minutes, I really liked that. I was like, that is creative. That's awesome. After 20 minutes, I was like, wowzers, that's freaking annoying. And I found it pretty irritating if I'm gonna be serious. So although charming initially, too much of it, and in that one specific case, not a whole lot of it, it started to get a little annoying. And it certainly can't carry. Like I want it to be fast. Like I don't want to watch the page turn and then slowly it draws the scene and then the narrator talks and then you do it again on the next page and then the next page. Like I found that starting to get annoying. So you mentioned the little concept art. One thing is you go through the levels, you can find, they look like little scrolls and they're hidden within the level. Sometimes you have to hit specific trees or objects or solve extra puzzles and you get them. And essentially it's concept arts for the game that we're not all the way through the game, so I can't promise. I know some of the art didn't get it into the game at all. Like they're showing some enemies that are like, hey, these were cool, but they didn't make it into the game. Or they had the beginning wizard, but he didn't have sunglasses. But in the real game, they chose to have sunglasses. And then some levels that, again, we're not all the way through the game. I don't know if those levels were ultimately in the game or not. Some of them I'm going to guess probably weren't. I like that. That kind of motivated me to search more in each of the levels. But things I don't like is that if you miss one, you can't always go back. And often I found out more often than not, you can't go back to get that. So am I going to have to play the whole game over again? Or at the end, maybe there's going to be a chapter select? But I can tell you what, this is not a game I want to replay. So so things that Astrobot did so well, where it's the small things, but that make it so polished and enjoyable to play. You can tell this game doesn't quite have it. So, I mean, starting to get maybe into some things I didn't love about it. You start us off, Alex. Is there anything that stands out or something you want to mention that you didn't necessarily love about the game? Because right now, what we've talked about, for the most part, has been pretty complimentary.
Yeah, I mean, the page turning thing that you can't go back to levels, right? Like I can't turn the pages back to the first page, right? And that would have been cool. Go back to the first page with my new powers and fight those first enemies again with my new abilities or something like that. That would have been cool. You know, it would really be cool if they could have designed the story this way. What if you could flip through the pages later on in the book and see what's going on? Maybe you can't interact with it because, you know, you haven't busted the story enough, but like, what if you could flip to the end and you see like what some of the last levels look like and it's just kind of like making you wonder what's going to be going on? That would have been cool if they could rope that in somehow. So it's like, again, they're not really taking advantage of the interesting gameplay mechanics that they came up with. Ultimately, you know, it's a storybook game. The story is mostly dull. The characters are mostly uninteresting. They're like very, it's a 2D story. Characters are really flat in the sense that like they're very archetypical. Oh, you know, it's a wizard. Isn't that cool? He's a wizard and he likes, you know, being a DJ. And that's about it. It's not really funny. Oh, it's a troll and he likes to be a rock climber and he talks like a skater dude. That's about it. You got this friend who's like a painter. And that's about it. And so like all this stuff like doesn't really mean anything. I don't care. I think you mentioned the like characters like I don't need you got your two friends running with you. They literally do nothing. I could care less what they say. And ultimately like anytime you reach a story beat, it almost becomes frustrating because I don't care about the story. They already tell you that you always win, right? There's not going to be a plot twist that really makes something interesting. Maybe there is. I don't know, but right now, nothing about the story is interesting. There's no setup that's made me excited to find out what's going on. And for that reason, anytime we enter a point where somebody's telling, when there's exposition, somebody's talking, you know, the story's progressing, it's just stopping me from having a good time with the game. So just the dull story is really holding the game back for the most part.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's a note that I made while I was playing the game is that like these companions they introduce, but you can't play as them. They don't have powers. They don't help you fight. It was funny, even on one aspect of the game when you were about ready to go fight Hump Grump for the first time, they were even like, oh, we're useless. Like, we're not good enough. We can't even help. And it's like, why even have them in the game?
Yeah.
Like that again, it is maybe seemingly a small thing, but why could I not control Violet? And she has spells. And it doesn't need to be a major part of the game, but at least there's a reason for her to be there. And the same thing for the other guy. But at least to this point, and I feel pretty good saying probably for the rest of the game, you don't use them. Like why exactly? I will say, and things that concern me is the first hour of the game is entirely 2D. You're playing in the storybook. It was really cool initially. I liked it, but after an hour, I was like, okay, I'm sick of this game. I'm done with it. But then I got thrown off by them throwing you into the 3D world. And that caught my attention again. And I was like, whoa. I forgot about the trailer. I wasn't expecting it. It happened. And I was like, holy crap, that's awesome. And immediately I was hooked again. However, that is their big hook, right? So I've seen everything up their sleeve. I've seen their best hit. So I'm wondering, after 2 more hours, am I going to tap out? And I'm going to be like, I'm sick of this. Like, personally, and argue if you think incorrectly, Alex, because I really hope I am wrong. I feel like we've seen their best punch and we've seen the best parts of the game. And later on, there's not going to be that big aha moment that's going to hook me again. And that is definitely going to play into the decision of, do I want to spend another 6 to 8 hours in this game?
Yeah, I have the same concern, but my concern's a little bit different in that, yeah, that 2D to 3D jump is the biggest thing. And right now they do nothing interesting with it. Nothing. It's basically tantamount to like run through a 3D level and then go into 2D to climb a ladder and then pop back out to 3D and you do 3D stuff again. And it's like, that's not an interesting use of the mechanic. My fear is that they do have something really interesting to do. There is some really interesting play with these mechanics or confluence of the mechanics, right? Like words in 3D and 2D and moving them around. But I'm afraid it's like not going to show up until the last level. Like it's like they had one really good idea where all the stuff plays together, and instead of sprinkling it out throughout the entire game, they're just like slowly grinding you for hours until you get to that last level where it's really good. To be fair, Moss, which I loved, the Moss Book 2, which I loved, was the same thing, right? It was fun and it was good and there were puzzles and stuff, and it really didn't reach something great until the last level. And it's like, is it worth going through the first 90% of the game to get that really nice 10%? And I'm having the same question here, although the first 90% of Moss was better than what I've played so far. And so I wasn't really, Moss was in VR too, so it made it just a lot more visceral and enjoyable for me. So yeah, I feel the same concerns for you. So I guess let's go on into it, Adam. Do you have anything else to say? Let's get into it. Will you keep playing the Plucky Squire, the Plucky Squire,
Yeah.
or not? Why or why not?
Dude, so it's tough. It is actually tough for me because the first thought at the end of chapter 4, during chapter 4, you help a fish who got caught out of water. You throw him back into the water. He's like, hey, thank you for saving me. And now I need to go find my wife. And then as you enter into chapter 5, as you go into the next land, the fish pops up again and is like, hey, I found my wife. And he's with his wife. And he's like, thanks so much. And I know, I mean, maybe back me up. Maybe I'm wrong, Alex. He's got to come back and help you in some way, right?
Yeah, because there was absolutely nothing there. Also, I want to say his name is Floatio, and it sounds so much like Fellatio. And I know they're not making a joke because it's like a kid's game, but that was just a pretty odd name.
It's funny. I like it. That bothers me that I like he's gotta come back. And now I'm wondering, like, oh, what's he gonna do? But I'm concerned that it's not gonna have staying power. I'm a little concerned that throughout the 2 hours, I have appreciated the creativity, the ingenuity, and although, the puzzles and stuff aren't super in-depth or difficult, they're still unique, and I still appreciate them. But I'm not necessarily having a good time. And I feel obligated to play because I've always harped on I want people to be creative and do stuff I've never seen before. And that's what these guys are doing. But just something about it, maybe it's too childish for me. Maybe it's not polished enough. Maybe it is a little too superficial. It's probably a collection of things, but I'm not, other than very short amount of times, I'm not actually enjoying it. So the other thing that bothers me, Alex, is it probably shouldn't matter. And this is why this game is, I think, the reason we wanted to do this podcast, and I love it. I don't have a family, so I have a lot more free time. However, so I could finish a 10-hour game, right? No big deal. 8 more hours. I almost like internally want to finish it just to finish it because I can't start something without finishing it. However, that doesn't mean that I don't have better things to do in an 8-hour span. You, on the other hand, don't have a lot of extra time. So those 8 hours may be more precious to you because you're sacrificing playing a better game or, I don't know, doing something else. So that's why I love this for this podcast. I mean, like I said, internally, my heart is like, dude, it's not that long. You have the time, finish it because you finish every game you play. But my mind's telling me like I don't want to. So that's where I'm at. So I guess if I gotta lay down the law and you're gonna force me, I think there are games on the backlog I'm more excited to play than to finish this game. I think I've seen the best that this game has to offer, and I'm ready to move on.
All right. Well, for me, I really what you said rings true for me too. I love when a game does something creative, and like I said, I think there's probably something really creative and ingenious that's going to be happening. Like you like the Magic the Gathering thing, like the card RPG thing. There's going to be more of that, right? I like the Punch Out. There's going to be more of that. There's going to be more shakeups in the game design. I'm sure there's going to be more of the 3D stuff that I like. I'm sure there's going to be more of the page turning, 2D meets 3D stuff happening. I just don't think it's going to be happening soon enough. And the thing that really sealed the deal for me when I hit out, like I was up in the air, 50-50, maybe 60-40 that I was going to continue playing this game up until the end of the last chapter. At the end of the fourth chapter. At the end of the fourth chapter, you like somehow rescue a village of snails. And when you rescue the village of snails, you're rewarded with a scene where there's like 7 snails on the screen and they each have to say something. And the thing they say is, I guess the writers thought it was really cute and enjoyable to read, and it just sucks. And I just hated every second of what they were saying, and I couldn't get through it fast enough. And then what happens after that? You go into chapter 5, and I was like, thank God I'm through with that. Let's get into the next chapter and see what it's about. And you get into the next chapter, and it's a world called Artia, which is like an art world. And it might be the least creative name for an art-themed world I've ever heard of in a video game. That made me sick to my stomach just seeing that. But when you get to that world, you see like 20 characters that you then need to talk to. So not only do we go from like 7 characters, and I can't wait for them to shut up so I can play the game, it then plants me in another level. This next chapter starts off with like 20 characters that I'm expected to talk to. When I'm done hearing anybody talk, I want to walk around and hit things with my sword and jump into the 3D world and freaking jump off the table. I'm tired of talking to these people. And at that point, I said, I really do not want to do this. I do not want to do this level. I'm so mad at this level already based on all the talking I've had to go through. And really the thing about this game, the unfortunate thing about this game, and when we're playing it, is that I think a lot of, unfortunately, games exist in the context of when they're released. This came out just after Astrobot, which is like in some ways the antithesis of game design. Astrobot never interrupts you. You are always moving, always playing, always doing the thing that is fun in Astrobot. This game interrupts you every freaking second. Every time you do something cool, guess what? Let's stop and talk about it. And it's not even fun talking. You know exactly what they're going to say before they're going to say it. The RPG thing, the thing that pissed me off about that, why I hated it, was you're playing this RPG thing, which is basically on rails and there's no choice to be made, and you die. And you're about to die. And a worm pops up out of nowhere and says, oh, let me just give you some more health. And then you fight more and you're thinking, okay, change it up. Maybe I'm going to beat him. And then you die again. And the worm pops up again and says, let me give you more health again. And now you're strong. You're going to kill him. There's zero strategy, zero thought. You're just hitting the button until the story just goes through.
I didn't get the worm the second time. You must suck.
Well, the worm just pops up. I'm going to give you a shield, and also you're super strong now. So
just the protection. Okay, that did happen. Yeah,
that nothing changes. And so really, what I want the game to be is a bunch of fun gameplay with a little bit of stories. What the developers seem to think we really wanted was reading a children's storybook and have little bits of gameplay, which is it's not fun at all. The story's not that good. The writing's not bad. It's just not that good either. The characters are not that interesting. The interesting stuff is the gameplay, and they're making that take a back seat. I don't want to play this game. I'm done with it. I don't want to play this game anymore. If anything, I'll watch a YouTube video of chapter 10 and see what I missed out on, and maybe I'll regret it. But I don't want to play this game anymore. I'm tired of it. I'm sounding more angry than I am, but the hubris.
That's a stronger stance than I thought you would take, since especially you recommended the game. You're the one who picked this. So obviously I would have thought like you had some interest in the game to begin with. Otherwise you wouldn't have recommended it, right?
Yeah, I did. And it's just because I thought it was going to be an interesting like puzzle action game, right? I thought it was going to be Zelda with interesting puzzles where you're going 2D and 3D. No, it's a storybook that every once in a while you get to play a little bit of Zelda, but you're really watching a story. And that is so boring. And it's the hubris of the developers to think that their writing was better than their game design. And it's not. Their game design's good. They need to do that. They don't need to do the writing. If nobody talked in this game, I would play through the whole game probably twice. But to your point with the characters, if you could play as the other characters, and they probably even do this, I bet if you beat the game, you could probably play through as Violet or the troll guy or Thrasher or whatever his name is. But guess what? I had no chance in hell I'm going to do that. I don't want to do this again. I don't want to do this ever again. I don't want to read another line of text in this game ever again because it's so mundane and boring.
Okay, here's the thing. To help frame this, because a big question is, who do you think they made this game for? Do you think they intended it to be a game that middle schoolers play? Because if so, I think the world, the puzzles, everything we just mentioned is okay. But I don't know. Like, what do you think?
The thing that makes me question who they made it for, I think they made it for people like you and me. I think they made it for people who like video games and are interested in novel ideas being explored. The thing that highlights that for me is when you start the game, they have, you can play adventure mode where it's going to be a little bit harder, or you can play story mode and just enjoy the story, which like that would be the kid mode, right? If this was made for kids, that's the kid mode. But obviously it's not made for kids because the main mode is like the adult mode where you fight and it's supposed to be challenging. The fact that they even think a story mode would be viable in this when it has such a boring story.
Could you imagine what would that even be? It's already easy. Like what?
No enemies, which is like the fun part gone. I don't know.
I don't know. The other thing I wondered, I mean, we're very lucky in that it was on PlayStation Plus for free.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? Is there anyone you would say, hey, you have a Switch, pay $35 for it? Or you have a PC, you have Steam, pay $30 for it? In what circumstance would you recommend it? Like, just because we don't finish it may not mean there isn't someone who we would recommend to play it. I can't think of one.
I don't even think I could recommend my kids. It's not hard. My kids could play it. I don't think I'd recommend it for them. I think they would bounce off of it. I think they would play a little bit and it would just get so much reading, and they can read just fine. Just so much reading and so much interruption. It would just be like, whatever. Unless the graphics are truly charming and it just captivates you, the visuals of the storybook. But they're good, but they're not that charming. They're not that interesting. It's not like you can go through some kids' books and you can just stare at the pages for a while because they've done really good work and it's just really beautiful. This isn't that. It's almost like a kid's book with the graphics of Super Mario World, which is like, yeah, interesting. But the fun part's that I'm running around as Mario and doing Mario stuff. It's that. So I don't know who it's for. Yeah. Shame.
Yeah. And I was worried that the first set of games we weren't going to reject. But look at this. Second game, third episode, we're already rejecting it. And really the thing that I think put the nail in the coffin for me was when I sat down and I thought, we have an opportunity to limit our backlog. And our virtual reality podcast, obviously we love, but we're stuck and we can only play VR games. With Gaming is in Session, we can play anything. I want to play Evo, A Search for Eden. You wanted to play Link Between Worlds on the 3DS. I wanted to maybe try Red Dead Redemption 2. I've played Balatro, but you haven't. We need
I
to
want to
play
play it.
that.
Yeah.
Pokemon Black and White. I've never played that. Maybe give it a shot. We know Silent Hill's coming up. I want to play those things. So when we're doing the podcast, do I want to push away Silent Hill 2 or Evo: A Search for Eden another 2 weeks or longer to finish this game? And the answer was heck no.
Yeah.
So again, another reason why I think this is a perfect game for this podcast. That also helped drive my decision. I think we got it, Alex. Our very first rejection. Get this out of here.
Get this out of here. Yeah, I mean, Into the Radius just came out on PSVR 2, but I had to play one more hour of this game, and let me tell you, it felt like a chore because I was chomping at the bit to play anything else. I wanted to play a VR game, wanted to play Into the Radius, and that last hour was a slog, and it's only the second hour of the game. So yeah, I don't know in what world I want to play this over anything else right now. But I think that's it. So yeah, thank you, everybody, once again for listening to Gaming is in Session. Now, if you like this, if you like what we're doing here, subscribe to us on YouTube, subscribe to us on iTunes, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. If you hate us, let us know. Review us on iTunes. If you enjoy our faces, then like us on YouTube. We are Gaming is in Session. If you hate our plucky faces, then subscribe there too so you can enjoy the hate every week. But either way, let us know. Leave us a comment. Email us. We are contact@playpsvr.com.
But whatever you think, that's our opinion on the Plucky Squire. And if you don't like it, tell it to the judges.